On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk the AV over IP revolution, and the new Apple TV has HDR and Dolby Vision. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 273. Don't let things get gummy.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Peerless AV, driving technology through innovation.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by three of my good friends. First, we have the one and only Haggai Feiner. He's the president of Access Networks. How you doing, Haggai?
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Thank you for being here, sir. Then we have Mr. Richard Fergosa. He is the principal at Fergosa Design. How are you?
Good. Mellow West Coast greetings. It looks like at least on my screen, I'm on the left side of the coast along with a guy. So, working well. I'm glad we were able to come in and pinch hit.
Thank you so much. Then we have Katie McGregor-Bennett. She's the president of KMB Communications. How you doing, Katie?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. You know, I've been planning for this for a very long time. I think it's about 6.5 minutes. So, yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
No, thanks to Katie and Rich for filling in. Joe was scheduled, but unfortunately he had to deal with some medical stuff. He'll be fine. Family will be fine. But, you know, stuff happens. So thanks to the community for hooking us up. All right, let's jump in to a story that comes to us from CE Pro, how to prepare for the AV over IP revolution. If you haven't heard, AV over IP is a thing. It's important. It's coming to residential. It's here. It's in residential AV. I do love this article. It gives a real good overview of essentially how to prepare for AV over IP, as you can imagine, and going through a couple of the main points, especially things like scaling and how you can start and where you can go from that. Haggai, you are the perfect person for this. It's like we handpicked you for this article.
Thank you.
You're welcome. When you see articles like this, when you see the conversations going around forums and all the messaging platforms that exist in our community, for the most part, most integrators are on board with the concept of this. Not every integrator has jumped in with both feet to make this an actual part of their business. How do you encourage and caution dealers to make the jump into AV over IP?
Encourage and caution. I think this is really discussed in the article itself. So big props to Brandon White from Vanco for putting this together. I think his read on the market is fairly accurate. The encouragement is that I believe that video distribution is exclusively going in this direction, meaning ultimately, you know, if we went from coax cables to HDMI to now IP, for example, I think the cables are going to get eliminated ultimately, and we will be left with network-based offering or streaming, you know, or both, you know, to some degree, a combination of the two. And so the writing's on the wall as far as I'm concerned. But again, easy for me to talk because I've seen the writing on the wall a long time ago. I would say on smaller projects, probably easier to handle. Where we've seen the limits being pushed with inside access is when you're talking about very large deployments. You're talking about multiple nodes, many TVs, and then you're trying to squeeze content and turn everything on at the same time. And all of a sudden you realize that even that 10 gig uplink that you had between switches is not good enough anymore, right? Because that's being squeezed. And what do you do when you have 11 nodes of 1 gig on each switch, and those two switches have a 10 gig link and it's not enough? So we can go to 40 gig, we can go to 100 gig. I think the biggest lesson for me is that those large projects, as much as we've planned before for those deployments, and we've created documentation and IP schemes and VLANs, when it comes to AV over IP and video distribution going exclusively to the network, that requires an extra layer of planning beyond just where those devices are going to plug, but how's everything going to work together as a cohesive system when you deliver that to the client. And we've seen, your pre-wire has to change, your equipment layout has to change, some technologies within those switches are changing. And so when you're selling this job today, and maybe you're expecting, if it's a big sprawling estate, probably a year or two from now to go install, even between now and then, some things are going to change. Mm-hmm. But I can tell that ultimately there are a lot more tools in the toolbox that we see to help us deal with those challenges than what historically you've had with other distribution systems where you're really canned into whatever the manufacturer gives you. The network has a lot of tools to deal both with troubleshooting and with the capacity that is required. Question is, are integrators independently going to be able to take on this burden on their own? And I can tell you, obviously, that's part of the reason Access Networks was created. So,
very good, Mr. Fregosa. When you see this, the Haggai did a really good job of covering kind of the ultra high end, the large scales where those choke points come. On the low side, is there actually a business case for it to jump in from the low end or from an entry level and go AV over IP? Or does it just make more sense to go to a localized solution where you're hanging things off a display, as everyone has essentially gone streaming? It limits the network load, it limits the complexity. Is that kind of the future for the entry level of AV over IP?
It goes back to your business model. Are you going to put yourself in a position where you are having to very quickly and cost effectively deploy solutions that aren't yours at low profit margins, to no profit margins in that solution, and deliver a result that's being pushed by the telcos, that's being pushed by the cable companies, that's being pushed by the satellite TV providers? That if that's your model, and and some dealers are doing it successfully, right? Some dealers are saying, yeah, we'll do 20 installs, every other day, and we'll push through, and this is how we work, and this is our process, right? We churn and burn. And so there's room for that in this market. I think that as you determine if your role from a technology advisor standpoint becomes a matter of saying, yes, this is an option, this is a cost-effective option, and these are the compromises. Because again, it all comes back down to looking at your client, who you are as a company. Now, AV over IP, there's going to be a certain point where you have no choice. The point-to-point products, the products that, and Haggai called it, right? We started out originally with coax. We were doing RF distribution. Then we went to point-to-point composite, S-video, component. Then we moved to HDMI, digital over Cat5 in a point-to-point without an IP version. And then now AV over IP. I mean, it's a progression of the technology. And manufacturers are going to look at it and say, we're selling less of these. So there's going to be a point that they're going to sunset the product. So you may not necessarily have a choice in terms of your product offering. So you have to take a look and say, am I either going to let the telcos provide all of these services and I come in and I'm the hookup guy, or are we going to provide managed services, provide the ease of use, the what we view as the reliability, the convenience features, the ability to synchronize a show across an entire estate.
So I would say we could do both while also selling a lighting solution and a shading solution and whatever else is needed for the project based on the homeowner need and expectation. Meaning, sure, these things are changing and we're going IP on video distribution, and maybe in years past the video distribution system was the most expensive ticket on the project, but today that reality is changing, and so we need to continue and adapt as we have in the past.
Yeah, very good. Katie, following up on this, one of the parts of the article that I do appreciate is the IT opt-out. We're seeing, to Haggai's point, to Rich's point, a lot of people are, quote unquote, happy to do your network. And they may not really know what they're doing beyond configuring that cable co modem and layer 1 switch. What is the point that most integration firms can either train up to be a proper network engineer for this world versus going out and hiring a network engineer that may or may not, because there's a very, it's a very small list of manufacturers and independent contractors, shall we say, that can do network engineering on a high level, but that's focused on residential and not traditional corporate IT. Where's that disconnect? Where's that move? Or are we going to see a lot more companies spurn out, kind of like, hey guys?
No, we're not going to see a lot more companies like Access Network spurring out because they're fitting the need of the integration community so well. Small plug there. No, but to kind of a multifold answer to your question is I think that there's what Rich mentioned a minute ago is you got to look at your business model, and I think that first and foremost is look at your business model and what can you take in-house or continue to offer and serve to this level of expertise where you're willing to be that end-all resource, or do you need to have an outsource community available to you for those projects that deem worthy of the additional level of service? And as a business owner, principal, executive team, you really just need to take a look at the model and what will it best support and what can you afford to do. The good news is, and kind of my joking plug at the beginning for Access, but there are so many manufacturers now in the industry that have taken design services or design consulting under their wing and are offering that to the integration community, in many cases free of charge. They are there to help you put together these solutions in such a way that they will perform well on the other end. Obviously, it's not just as easy as involving just one manufacturer when you're talking about all of the AV gear that's potentially connected. But if you start with a strong foundation and get that right, it's my belief that then the additional pieces, components and devices on top of it will inherently be in a position to perform and continue performing optimally. There's the bolt-on to it. So it's like once you get the install done, then what do you do about service and support? And I think that's part of looking at the model is once a project is done or this phase of the project is done, then does it make sense for you as the installing integration firm to be the one to continue doing the support, or is it kind of have you kind of reached your cap, and at that point do you need to find somebody to sort of hand that ongoing relationship off? Again, it depends on the project and it depends on the scope of your business. As a communicator and someone who works with brands, it's just I think you just need to look at your model and be true to your brand. What are you guys trying? You guys, gals, your team. What are you trying to accomplish? And can you do that in house? And does it make sense financially, emotionally? All of those. Check those boxes.
I just wanted to jump in on one quick thing about this that a guy said. About the hybrid model. We keep talking about video over IP because it's the sexy part of it, right? Everybody's got these streaming devices. Audio over IP in the Resi space is quickly accelerating. I am seeing a whole lot more functional, reliable, scalable AES-67 and Dante solutions that are out there. Personally, from a consultant standpoint, I find that I am specifying more professional, commercial, standardized products because they support this hub and spoke model. Because the big problem is you say, okay, well, great, you've got your local cable box, you've got your local Apple TV, whatever you have in a room. And if that client asks you, well, I've got a Super Bowl party or I've got an Oscars party, how do I play this over this 18-room stereo system that you sold me? Let me get back to you on that. Now we can say, great, with these solutions, we have the ability to go ahead and, it will follow you or it'll spread any way across. And I think that that's something that for the CI market, again, we keep talking about resi-mercial. You have to be willing to embrace it. The way that you've been selling it is not the way you're going to continue selling it if you want to stay in business.
Hey, thanks for watching the first segment of this week's episode. To catch the entire show, please click the link below or visit avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.